A little while ago, I had a short interview with Annemie de Smet about how relational metacognitive scientists or experts are able to tap into the collective subconscious of a group. So that's basically the things that are playing in the background and that people have a hard time putting their finger on. So things that should be done, things that are missing, but that we don't really know exactly what they are. And then of course the group is important because if all people hold a little piece of the puzzle of what is missing, then we can bring it together, and then people actually will more easily recognize what is missing rather than having to fully construct that themselves, and so move their thoughts from the subconscious into their conscious. Today I want to elaborate a little bit more on that, and I want to do that by saying what the difference is between managing the collective subconscious and feedback. So a lot in systemic thinking, in organization management, a lot is said about loops, feedback loops, feed sideward loops, feed forward loops, and so on. And that is basically not what metacognitive scientists or relational metacognitive experts are doing with groups of people. So when we're looking at feedback is and evaluations and improvements and innovations are intrinsically connected with a particular activity or reality. Now, what generally is not acknowledged in organizations is the concept of what we call parallel realities. And parallel realities are actually different layers of reality that are playing at the same time. So when we were talking about the subconscious, we were talking about what is playing in the background, but we can also say that what plays in the background is basically all the layers that are playing, but that are not the active layer at this moment in time in people's thought. And actually we know now that there are at least 6 of those realities that play in our head, movies, so to say, of what is going on, the things that we see and perceive. And basically in our minds, there are at least 6 movies that are playing at the same time, but generally only one is the one that we're actually looking at, all while the others are still recording and playing, and that our mind is busy with those. So our mind is able to look at 6 movies at the same time, while actually, of course, our brain is generally looking at things from a singular viewpoint. So now I just want to briefly say what exactly those 6 layers are. And each of those layers, when they're active, comprise their own evaluation, feedback, and innovation mechanisms, and they are part of the layer. So the evaluation of a particular movie or layer of reality is not a different reality. It's part of the same reality. And that is where companies go wrong. They think that the improvement activity or the feedback is actually a different layer of reality, but it's actually part of the same. So what are the 6 realities that we are talking about? Well, indeed, the first one, of course, is the task at hand. So the things that are being done. And we can always say well, something else needs to be done. So the evaluation is part of that, and then we can change that and so on. But it's still the task level or the operational level. The second level is the coordination level. So that is like the people who have to overlook different activities and so on. And also that activity, we call it maybe management, has its own, let's say, feedback and say how can we manage this better? But now the question is, beyond those, which are now in our minds the parallel realities that play in the minds of all people in an organization or in a particular context. These can be customers or spectators or citizens or whoever is around a particular activity. Well, first there is the layer of concerns. So it means that concerns is not like a problem. It's not the same as something that should be done differently. A concern that is the movie that says, it's a different movie that tries to simulate what the future will look like if we keep doing what we're currently doing. And that is not so much an evaluation of the current situation. It's just a projection into, it's basically a movie about the future. It's a futurist movie. And it runs in all the brains of all the people. And so it's basically like, if we keep doing what we're doing, when we will go wrong, how big the catastrophe will be, or on the positive end, what will be the opportunities that will be realized that today we were unable to harness. So that is like the third movie, so to say. And there are three more, and I'm gonna tell them. So the fourth layer is basically the movement of involvement and commitment and co-creation in processes. Is basically the question that we are having all the time, whether the right people are involved in what is going on. Now, that is very often in evaluation, let's say, overlooked, in the sense that there we generally deal with the usual suspects. We involve people, we think that we should involve other people, but basically that is still part of the evaluation. But when we are really thinking about who should be involved, sometimes very different names can come up and so on. But interestingly is that this idea about who should be involved and more committed or be part of the co-creation is also something that kind of plays every moment, but not consciously. But the moment that we start to evaluate, it can be that we tap from that reality. So it's important that we don't only start to think, our minds start to think about this question after a particular task or reality is over, but that is basically a movie that is playing all the time. So our minds are alerted when or are thinking about are the right people there in that environment. The fifth layer is power, meaning that we are, all our minds of all the people in any environment are extremely sensitive to power and power abuse, like who is pushing an agenda here. Now, very often that is not, again, in our conscious. We just do what we need to do, we go with the flow and so on. We don't try to make things more difficult than they already are. But the power question is something that our mind is programmed to analyze. Who is pushing, who's trying to control, who has a particular interest in the outcomes of a process and so on. So that is the fifth reality. And the sixth reality is loyalty. That is like who's back here and who will unconditionally stay with something even if there will be detrimental results. Very often, actually, this is called bias, when people do unlogical things. But very often, people from a loyalty perspective do actually very logical things. They actually are ready to suffer, also economically, but also mentally, physically, socially, and so on, only to sustain their loyalty. And so that is actually a degree, loyalty is a reality that is even higher than power. So who is backing each other and so on. So these are the six realities. And what we in R500 with our conversational specialist are able to do is teach an organization how to have conversations so that they are able to surface from the minds of people all the information, all the thoughts, but also all the behaviors that should be done in order to kind of come to peace in those different realities and create value. Well, very often, of course, it has been proven that an internal facilitator or leader is actually not in best position to bring those elements out. Why? Because that person itself is under scrutiny of the minds of people, so that people start giving socially polite answers and so on, or actually don't talk at all. And in that case, of course, there is need for an external facilitator. So if you want to have the totality of those six parallel realities on the table, then you should have both internally educated leaders, but also an external facilitator who works in a safe way with a mandate from the top.